Welcome back to Just Plain Crypto. Today we're going to talk about why you need, why I need, why everybody needs Bitcoin. Cryptocurrencies, you could say, but really primarily we're just going to talk about Bitcoin. This is a topic that really you could spend hours and hours and hours covering all of the finer points and all of the details of exactly why Bitcoin is so great and why everybody has to have it. But we're going to do a quick gloss over because I'm assuming that a lot of people at least know kind of sort of what Bitcoin is. A lot of people are very confused as to why Bitcoin is better than any other cryptocurrency out there at what it does, which is being a store of value and being a fungible currency. Much like digital gold, except Bitcoin is better than gold. Well, how can that be? I can make jewelry out of gold, right? Bitcoin is just crazy internet money. Well, we'll get into that, and we'll talk about that. First, we have to talk about a thing called inflation. And that's when, you make minimum wage is $7.25 federally in America. Well, your $7.25 doesn't buy you nearly what it would have 50 years ago. Not even close. It's like 15 times less than what it would have bought you 50 years ago. And that is because of inflation. And that is because of inventing money out of thin air. The federal government recently wanted to print $2 trillion, so they go to the Federal Reserve and they say, hey, I'd like a couple of $1 trillion. And the Federal Reserve writes $2 trillion on a napkin and slides it over to the government. And then the government goes and spends money on whatever they feel like. And that's the way that things work. That is the monetary system. That is how it is. And it's been that way since 1971. And what that causes is because there's so much money in the system, that it causes inflation to where you're getting paid the same, but the items you're buying a can of soup for $1 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and now you're paying $2 for the same can of soup and your income has not changed. That is inflation. And you're actually seeing that right now. Food prices are up about 20%. Housing prices are up 25 to 30% just in the last year. That is inflation. That is not because everybody decided they're just going to go out and go buy a house. I mean, that's part of the reason because a lot of people in America at least see the writing on the wall with where they're living and trying to get out of the cities and things. But really, it's an inflationary problem because people are seeing that their money is not buying as much and they're trying to get into hard assets like real estate, also like Bitcoin, also like gold and silver. Now, the only problem with gold and silver is that it's been manipulated and controlled by the Federal Reserve for a very long time to hide the fact of how much inflation is taking place. The government actually admits to 1 to 2% inflation taking place every year, and they find that acceptable. Well, I don't understand how you find stealing 1 to 2% of your people's wealth every single year for eternity to be acceptable, but that is the fiat debt Federal Reserve system that most people have grown up with. So how inflation is stealing your wealth, and this is just what it is. What it is you cannot save money. If you save money, you lose money. And it used to be a certain, when I was a kid, we'll just say, you'd get like 2% interest or something on your bank account for having money in it to make up for what the supposed inflation rate was. So that way, if you saved money, you could actually save it. Well, now if you put $100 in your bank account, really it's only worth 85 the next year after inflation. You lose the 15% because you can't buy as much with it. So you need to go out and spend. And that's the situation that the economy is in now. And it's really gotten bad to the point where they can't hide what is going on with the currency system anymore, which is why you need something like Bitcoin that cannot be inflated. Bitcoin is locked into a specific amount at 21 million coins. That's the max that will ever be in existence. And there's actually much less than that. It's deflationary because people lose their keys to their Bitcoin. People die and they don't hand it off to somebody else. So those coins are gone. So deflation is more or less built into the system where your Bitcoin is always going to be worth more and more and more and more. Why does Bitcoin have value in the first place? Because people recognize it as being um, a trusted unit of value, a trusted currency that can't be counterfeited. That's the big thing. Is like, it seems like the Federal Reserve and the banks are basically, their entire business model is fraudulently counterfeiting money. That's the entire business model. Banks, if you're not aware, are allowed to loan out something like 100 times whatever money they're actually given. So you go to the bank and you have $1,000 in the account, in your savings account, right? Well, they immediately take that and go and invest it, or they loan it out for houses, and they take your $1,000 and they can loan out $100,000 on that. It may even be $1 million. I'm not sure the exact numbers, and it doesn't matter, because if they run out of money, they go to the Federal Reserve, and then the Federal Reserve just, writes on a napkin however much money somebody needs and slides it over to them. Backed by nothing, right? I mean, in theory, there is a bond market that supposedly holds up all of this stuff, and that's nonsense. It's all nonsense. And that has to do because of the fiat system. And that comes in with 1971 under President Nixon. This is coming up on the 50th anniversary here in August, in a week or so, where before 1971, you used to be able to take your dollar bill or your $5 bill and go to the Treasury office and get gold or silver for it. Okay, whatever it was worth. And it was a fractional reserve sort of system where you had so much gold for, you'd have gold and you could issue more money than what you had gold for, but it was still based on gold. So you could, like the banks who can issue 100 times on your savings, maybe the government could issue 100 times on their gold or 100 times on their silver. But when you actually took the notes and you actually went to a Treasury office, they gave you the actual amount of silver or gold or whatever for the currency that you brought in. 1971 did away with that, and at that point, that was it. There is no more gold, no more silver is worthless, because governments don't even use it anymore. Right? There's no attachment to gold and silver in the monetary system at all. It's kind of an investment hedge that some people think or use it for. I mean, silver is valuable because we're using it in a lot of electronics. They use it in solar cells and electric cars and things like that. It actually has a practical purpose, but gold is effectively just jewelry. Nobody actually uses it for anything. And it's just about impossible, if you have a whole bunch of gold, to move it to somebody else, or if you want to pay a bill with that, how are you going to do that? Right? So gold has fallen by the wayside, but it was something that was more or less fungible, where everyone agreed on an ounce of gold is going to be worth XYZ amount, and that was what your economy is kind of based on. Well, it's all been fantasy play money since 1971, so the generation of the boomers had a really great time, who can just write everything off on credit. And back in their day, when I'm discussing the minimum wage and we're talking about inflation, minimum wage right now is $7.25 federally. Granted, most states will pay more than that as the state minimum wage, but the federal minimum wage is $7.25. The federal minimum wage in 1965 was $1.25. Okay? Unfortunately, if you look at the inflation rate and the cost of goods and services, a person who has turned 16 years old, whenever you could start working around 16, probably even back in 1965. You could go work at the fruit stand and sell apples to people, and you'd have to be paid at least $1.25 an hour. And with that $1.25, you could buy a couple of pounds of steak. You could buy 10, 15 comic books. You could buy all sorts of stuff. You could buy a house for $9,000. You could buy cars for less than $1,000, brand spanking new. You could go to a 4-year college and it would cost you $2,800. Okay, so now today, if you take those prices as to what they are correlate to today, the federal minimum wage would have to be $30 an hour to equate what the boomers grew up with at $1.25 minimum wage. Okay, You'd have to be, how many of you are making $30 an hour? If you're not making $30 an hour, you're not even making the federal minimum wage equivalent to 1965. Now, how can that be, and how come we don't notice? Well, when we started having a problem with inflation, we decided, America, or the politicians at the time, and the boomer people, whatever, actually probably would have been silent generation, 1990s, said, well, China's no longer our enemy. We'll just use them as slave labor. And China was cool with that. And we sent over all of our businesses and everything over to China to use their labor and pay people pennies a day to build our stuff. So that drove the cost of goods and all these things down. And plus then we have the computer and the internet and all these things that came in that effectively people really didn't have to work much anymore, right? So the cost of goods, everything is automated. You've got the computer and the internet, and you have all of these ways that people don't have to work as hard to get that much more output. And that drives the cost of goods and services and stuff down, right? So you can have the minimum wage, lower, and you can have people basically making slave wages, right? Because if the goods they're buying are coming from people who make even less, then it all evens out. But we're getting into this time right now where countries like China are they're rich enough where they don't have to listen to America anymore. And things like shipping and all of these things are going up, and even our locally grown stuff, our foods, commodities, our housing is all going through the roof. It's inflating at a normal rate. Whereas you can still buy a television from China for just about nothing, right? You can get a big 50-inch television for like $200, right? Whereas the equivalent of that back in 1965 was probably a considerable amount of money. You know, the cost of goods probably in 1965 were probably more, but you know what wasn't? Housing wasn't. Education wasn't. And your food, the things that you need to survive, those would have gone crazy through rents and inflation and all this stuff. Through rents and your housing and your food has gone crazy up. Yeah, you can buy a frying pan for cheaper, and you can buy a hammer for cheaper from Walmart, and you can buy your television for cheaper from Walmart. But those are frivolous. The actual things that you need, like a place to live and food, have gone up, and the wages have not compared with that. Now, I realized the other day that when I was, 20 years ago, one of my first jobs that I stayed at, I was a baker at a grocery store. I work at a grocery store now, and I actually make less money. Okay, and I wasn't doing anything super high tech or whatever at the grocery store. I was just a regular grocery store guy, and I actually make considerably less now. And it's been 20 years. So that explains inflation for you and what's been going on. And people wouldn't know this unless they look at history, or unless they recall how things were where they were a kid and actually investigate as to why these things happen. This is what got me into cryptocurrencies and things like that, because, you got to when you find out how shady the system is and how everything is based on fraud and how the banksters are always bailed out and the politicians are all corrupt, doing their insider training and getting kickback deals and all of these things. It's like, well, what is a way to actually get away from this system? And what is a way to actually not have to deal with it? And the answer is through cryptocurrency. You've got something that cannot just be created out of thin air, that you can't, you don't have to be a slave to. Now, last year, a lot of independent contractors, also known as professional athletes, all wanted to be paid in Bitcoin. And trend is going to continue, because they get their $1 million paycheck. They have a huge tax burden on that. But if they get the bulk of it in something like Bitcoin, they can take it out as they need it, and it's money that will persist through the future. So yeah. Deflation we talked about. What's the difference with Bitcoin as opposed to other cryptocurrencies? Now, really, there isn't, if you're new to investing, there isn't a reason to even look at other cryptos, at least for the start. But what Bitcoin has is it's called a proof of work system. And now why that is really, for what it does, if you're looking for something that's to hold its value, you'd want a proof of work style system because it actually takes effort to create the money. Proof of work means that computers and miners have to do calculations in order to add to the blockchain, add more money to the system. Like as I said, it's capped at 21 million coins. I think they've mined 19 million so far. Maybe not even that much. It's pretty close though, 18 or 19 million. And it takes huge amounts of computing power to get the right sequence together in order to add another block to the chain. And what these miners also do is they take all of the transactions that are happening on the network and they validate them and make sure that they're legitimate transactions. And then they add it onto the chain. Now what that does is create a super robust, super secure network that requires thousands of computers to actually validate and make sure that everything is A-okay. Of course, Bitcoin can operate with just a computer, one computer. It wouldn't be very secure, right? So what that means is that it actually takes effort to create money. You cannot just poof it into existence. And if you wanted to change how many coins Bitcoin would be producing, instead of 21 million, it's a computer program, let's just make it 100 million, right? Well, even if you did that, the algorithm that limits it to 21 million coins is a computer algorithm that even if you extended the amount of Bitcoin out to 100 million coins, the computers wouldn't be able to solve the equation. So you got your 21 million coins. It's like it gets gradually harder and harder and harder and harder and harder to make these new coins the farther out that you get. And right now they're doing them once every 10 minutes. There is a limit on that. It's like once every 10 minutes. But then every 4 years there's a halving where it gets twice as difficult to solve the equations. And eventually it'll be to the point where you're going to have like one coin come out every month and one coin every year. You know, it's the way that the system is. And that is good because you cannot tamper with it. The other version of this is called proof of stake, where most other coins out there, tokens, coins, are what's called proof of stake. And that is where some company somewhere, we'll take XRP, decides I'm going to create 100 million coins out of thin air. Poof, it's done. I've got 100 million coins and now I can go up to the exchange and just sell them. And then XRP wonders why it's in trouble with the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission. It's because they finance their company by selling nonsense, really. And that's proof of stake. Now, proof of stake is very useful in certain types of coins and tokens. Like, you know, Ethereum is proof of work. It's moving to proof of stake. But blockchains like Ethereum are not a currency, really. They're completely different from a Bitcoin. So yes, with Bitcoin, with proof of work, Bitcoin will get a lot of FUD, a lot of negativity, because it takes so much power to mine Bitcoins and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, it's worthwhile. Wouldn't you want to spend enough like power to make sure that your money is secure? That's what that is. It uses a fraction of a percent of what the current monetary system uses. It uses a fraction of a percent is what they take to mine gold and mine silver. And the argument is that, oh, well, it takes as much, Bitcoin mining power that small countries could run off the power that Bitcoin needs to generate or operate. And it's like, well, yes, number one, there's a lot of very small countries out there that is true for. It's also very true that if you run Christmas lights in America during Christmas time, you also use as much power as small countries. It's all in how you wanna spin the topic, and that's really all it's about. Is people want to spread negativity about Bitcoin because they don't want you investing in it. They don't. They want to keep all of the Bitcoin for themselves and lock everybody else out. And that is the game plan. And the idea, too, that Bitcoin uses a lot of power, well, Bitcoin actually has made people go out to go look for cheap power, and where they can't find cheap power to mine, they create sustainability by using solar power and wind power and very, very, very cheap methods of getting electricity. Flare gas that would be burned off is what a lot of people are doing now for Bitcoin mining. Flare gas is when you go mine for oil, there's usually gas in the well, and they hit a pocket of gas. There's nothing they can do with it when they're drilling for oil. So they burn it off or just let it shoot off into the air. So what they're doing now is that they're harnessing that, and they're using it to power generators that will power Bitcoin mining. So there's that. And of course, solar power, wind power. Bitcoin is financing a lot of communications things to go up in Nigeria for solar panels. And and all they're doing, they have their solar panels and they're setting up a miner in their town and doing a lot of charity work with things like that. So the power used by Bitcoin is not even comparable to anything else. It's a lot of energy when you look at it overall, but you also look at 75% of it is from green energy sources. Okay, and you compare what Bitcoin does, which is financial freedom for the common guy, right? What it does for people, you want it to cost a lot of money. You want it to be good. You want it to be expensive. You want it to be hard to create Bitcoin. And so, I look at that as like being a good thing. There is also no flooding the market with coins, right? It's not like you can fire up another 10,000 miners tomorrow and then you're going to get coins coming out 3 times as fast. They're limited to once every 10 minutes. So there's a lot of protections built in with Bitcoin to make sure that it can't be messed with. And that's the thing, is that there's no company behind Bitcoin. It was set up, it's autonomous, and it was a direct response to bailing out the banksters in 2008. And I was around for 2008, and I remember that whole thing. So the banksters go out and go fraud everybody and play with their money and sell everybody bad mortgages and bad debts. And then they throw all their crappy mortgages into people's retirement accounts, and the whole thing goes broke. And who gets to pay for it? The taxpayer. So the team Satoshi, creators of Bitcoin, created Bitcoin as to be an alternate source of money, alternate currency, to give people some freedom from fiat. Because the only country that I'm aware of on the planet that is not using fiat currency right now is El Salvador, who switched to a Bitcoin standard. And I'm sure they still have fiat also, but they're going to use Bitcoin. Uruguay is looking at it, and also Nigeria. Nigeria uses it even though the government's banned it. Nigeria is the #1 users of Bitcoin in the world, and their government, I believe, has banned it because nobody wants to use because it's a threat to their monetary system. So I also want to talk about what other people are saying when it comes to cryptocurrencies, particularly people who are supposed to be all wise investor types, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Chase, all of these investor types that you read about in your Forbes magazine and all of these. Now look, these guys have no reason to tell you the truth. They've been down on Bitcoin and like Peter Schiff and these people, these billionaire people who are like, oh, it's just crazy internet money and it's not worth anything. And, here we have an article that says Goldman Sachs Bitcoin not an investable asset class. Which is interesting because Bitcoin, as it's classed right now in America, at least, is that it's the same as kind of like a house, right? It's digital property. But then it says Dogecoin is ideal for speculation. And this comes from Goldman Sachs. And we look at the article, it's June 17th, 2021. So this is like 2 months ago. Investment bank Goldman Sachs has said in a report issued earlier this week that cryptocurrencies are not a viable investment. despite showing interest in Bitcoin and Ethereum recently. So Goldman Sachs here is coming out and saying that it's not an investable asset, and a lot of other big notables have said things like this too. But people who keep up on the cryptocurrency markets and what's going on, we all know that all of the banks are getting crypto. PayPal is going to accept crypto. Amazon is going to accept crypto. Bitcoin is going to completely destroy and eliminate the need for banks. Cryptocurrency in general is completely, there is no more need for banks. So this idea, of course, they're telling you that, oh, nobody wants Bitcoin. It's not a good thing to get invested in. Believe us. Now, guys, these lying scumbags at Goldman Sachs, one of the worst offenders for playing games with the markets, and Morgan Chase and all these, and BlackRock and Grayscale, all of these guys, they're under no compulsion to give you any good advice at all. All right? None. They fall into the category of your regular news. As to whatever they tell you, just assume the opposite. All right? And I'm going to prove it to you. This came out June 17th, 2021. Investable Bitcoin, Goldman Sachs, Bitcoin not an investable asset class. All right. Now we're going to go to the next article here that came out August 6th, 2 days ago. JP Morgan follows rivals Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley to offer Bitcoin funds to clients. Well, 2 months ago, they said it's not an investable asset class. Where did these guys get the Bitcoin to offer to their richest clients? You see, they're putting the negativity out there so that people don't buy, and they can keep the price down at 30,000 a coin. And then they announce, hey, you can come buy Bitcoin from us. And miraculously, the price starts to go up. Huh. So don't pay attention to these clowns. Don't think that they know something that you don't know. The only thing that they know is that they're just not telling you, because they're, like I said, they have no reason to go out of their way to tell anybody anything. So if they do say something like such and such isn't worth investing in, they're probably investing in it. All right, they're probably investing in it. It's like Amazon's been hiring, or Amazon or Apple has been hiring for a cryptocurrency specialist director or something for like 6 months now. And it's been leaked that Amazon is going to create their own coin, and they're going to accept cryptocurrency for payments on Amazon. And then Amazon comes out and says, no, we're not. No, we're not. Right? And then it comes out officially that, of course, they are. They just lie. All the time. All the time. So with back to Bitcoin, as to why everybody needs it, it's the freedom aspect of it, okay? But it's also worth a lot of money. It's also a really great investment. There is no investment in the history of America that has returned more. And you're talking about stocks and bonds and that sort of thing. Bitcoin 1 year ago on this chart was around $10,000. Right now, it's at $45,000. In the last week, it gained 50%. So it was at $30,000 in here. After May 19th, there was a pretty big crash, and went from around 50,000 down to 30,000. But in just the last 10 days, it went up by 50%. Okay. So 1 year ago, it was 10,000. 6 months ago, it was 65,000. So if you played the markets right, you could have gotten a 650% profit, right? Or if you're a holder like me, you get a 300% profit. That now is up to 45,000, and it will be going up to probably 100. I don't see why it wouldn't. And that is a conservative estimate. As an opinion from me, right? I'm actually more conservative than most people. Most people are saying 150, 200. But Bitcoin's only been around for 12 years, and it's like the most valuable asset you can get a hold of. And we talk about Bitcoin in relation to other cryptocurrencies and why you should really only consider Bitcoin, at least for starters, is because it is the only one that has survived the test of time, and it's been attacked. It's been banned in all these countries. All of the miners just moved out of China, which is another great thing. All the people that are securing the network, all the people that are mining new coins had to leave China. And China was the biggest mining country in the world. Bitcoin lost half of its hash rate. All of those computers that are working all of the functions to put the blocks together, the equations and whatnot, and the guessing game of the mathematics. They had to leave, and they came to America and Kazakhstan and El Salvador and a lot of other places, but the hash rate fell by 50% and Bitcoin kept on going. Weaker chains would not hold up. There's a lot of coins that use proof of work that are older coins that don't hold up. They don't have a following, a track record. They don't do what Bitcoin does. And they get what's called a 51% attack, where half of the miners decide to do something different than what the developers wanted. And then that's kind of it for your coin. Bitcoin survived the test of time. They've even had a couple of hard forks where Bitcoin Cash wanted to do its thing and Bitcoin Satoshi Vision broke off from Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is still here. So we have that going for it. And of course, there are people out there who will say, well, Ethereum is going to take over and these other things are better investments. And it's, there really isn't enough time in the day to discuss all of that. What you can say is, if you're into your investments, if you believe in like stocks and bonds and investing in real estate and actually, want to have investments and things like that, the asset you're looking for is Bitcoin, where you buy it and you just hold on to it unless you need it, and then you cash it out. And that's the thing, is anytime 24/7 you can cash out your Bitcoin to your bank, and there's no big process. Now, what are you going to do if you need money and you got to sell a few ounces of gold? How long is that going to take you to do? A long time. What if you decide you want to move to Mexico and you need, $50,000 down in Mexico? How long is that going to take to go through the Federal Reserve System and going through wiring transfers and all of this garbage? Or you could just go to your Bitcoin wallet and you're done. Send the funds that way. So yeah. And you look at like a comparison for those types of assets to Bitcoin, you look at gold, it's only gone up 20% in 50 years. So gold itself hasn't even kept up with inflation. And unfortunately, it's been really, 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 really held down by the Federal Reserve by the creation of what's called a derivative. So you got real gold that nobody actually owns, and real silver that some people own somewhere. And then you've got derivatives, which is paper gold and paper silver. And of course, there's 1,000 times more. I promise I've got gold for you, and I promise I have silver. There's 1,000 times more of that in paper than there is actual physical stuff. And that keeps the market down. Unfortunate, but that's what it is. And, we're not living in 1800 anymore. We're not in 1849 in the California gold rush. We are in 2021 in the Bitcoin gold rush. It's the Bitcoin rush, to get as much as you can. Everybody should have some Bitcoin. Everybody. And there's a lot of reasons that people don't like Bitcoin, and that's fine. The thing is, though, is that people who are worried about things like the government clamping down and taking your stuff, well, Bitcoin can't be confiscated. Gold can. Silver can. They've done it before in the past. You cannot take somebody's private keys. The blockchain is open so that people can see transactions and where they're going, but you don't know who they're going to. There's anonymity in it, but the blockchain is open so that you're always doing an audit. Anybody can audit the blockchain and see where money is going and flowing in and flowing out, which is great. And another reason the government doesn't like it, because if the government used it, we'd know where all their money is going. So that's a good thing, that people can see the transactions out there and validate them and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's about all I have on that. And it's late, and I'm going to be done.